so we have a massive firestorm on our hands. Most of you know who Mr. Beast is, but not all of you know who Chris is. Chris is one of Mr. Beast's longtime friends, longtime member of the Mr. Beast YouTube channel. And over the past several months, people have noticed something a little bit strange. So, you know, Mr. Beast, as the channel has grown, has been adding lots of new members to his channel. To the point where it's like a company, basically. He's got full staff and everything, just like Moses. One of these new members of his channel is also a content creator. His name is Karl Jacobs. Now, people have been saying that ever since Karl Jacobs joined the YouTube channel, Chris has been more and more effeminate, to the point where this is something that's been dubbed as the Karl effect. Now, I don't know how legit this is. You know, I don't know if this is something that Karl is pressuring him into doing, or if this is something that just naturally happened as Chris got to know Karl better, or if Karl has, you know, no connection to Chris's transition process at all. But news has come out that Chris is transitioning. He's not necessarily binary, I suppose, but he's on HRT now. And he actually went and left his entire family as this transition has been occurring. He and his wife are currently getting separated. In the midst of all of this, SunnyV2 put out a video kind of encapsulating the whole drama, and it's gotten massively disliked. Some people have been calling it like transphobic. Some people have just been saying it's bad takes. SunnyV2 has been taking fire, you know, over the past year, really, for the way that he puts out his videos. I understand it too, because SunnyV2 can be overly negative. You know, the title of this video alone shows it, right? Why Chris will soon be a nightmare for Mr. Beast. We don't know if Chris becoming trans is going to be bad for Mr. Beast and his brand. You know, one could assume that, you know, a lot of people are going to be upset about it, but there's a whole other cadre of folks who are going to be happy about it. Anyone connected to the ESG most certainly is likely to give Mr. Beast more money now. So, I don't know what exactly is happening here. I have not seen this video, and I don't watch Mr. Beast's content. So, let's watch SunnyV2's video together, shall we? And see what the heck is going on, and see if SunnyV2's video is as bad as people are saying it is.
The Chris Tyson situation could become a complete disaster for Mr. Beast's brand. However, it may also provide some unique benefits. So let's begin by going over the drama before explaining exactly how this will impact the Mr. Beast channel. In mid-2022, fans began to notice that Chris Tyson was changing. In the early days, he represented the quintessential...
You know, if he's supposed to be this macho dude who's extremely, you know, masculine, Meat Lovers doesn't belay that the way that, you know, you would think that it does.
Southern gun and truck loving dude. Yet beginning in March 2000...
Okay, Official Mike in the chat says Chris is virtue signaling. I don't know much about the people involved, but I will say, based on everything I've seen, which is granted very scant, I don't think that he's virtue signaling. I think that this is a legit transition. Now, it's possible that he's virtue signaling, but, you know, unless Karl Jacobs is blackmailing him, I don't even see how or why he would virtue signal, because, you know, he's part of Mr. Beast. He's on top of the world, probably making millions of dollars. I don't know why he would even need to virtue signal.
Yet beginning in March 2022, Chris began to display increasingly feminine traits, making tweets such as "I finally got my nails done at a nail tech." Additionally, Chris would...
Interesting. I mean, that is a typically feminine thing to do, but a lot of straight cisgender men, you know, paint their nails. So, I mean, of course, I know that this is just one in a series of changes that he's making, but to say that this is the first clear indication that you know, something was up is it's a little far-fetched.
Highlight that his facial appearance had changed significantly since the start of the pandemic, which accompanied another post reading, "Okay, so in 4 different customs I had to prove I was myself because I, quote, look nothing like my passport pic, so much that I'm considering updating my passport. Do you see any resemblance?"
That's really interesting. It looks like he's lost some weight, in a healthy way, not an unhealthy way. His face looks healthier, a healthier shape, a different shape than it was before.
Prompting replies such as, "You went from man to boy." Chris responded by stating, "Nah, to be honest, I just really started taking my mental health seriously and eating better."
We can see that with
Yet his
his
Twitter
weight
photos
loss
kept
there.
insinuating that Chris was becoming more feminine, with this same kind of look showing up in his Mr. Beast appearances. For example, on the 6th of January 2000.
Also, I will say, like Mike said, Chris looks ugly for a girl. First of all, he's not identifying as a girl yet. I think he identifies as non-binary. Second of all, you're absolutely right. That hairstyle is just not working for him.
Kind of look showing up in his Mr. Beast appearances. For example, on the 6th of January 2023, Beast Reacts uploaded a video titled "I strapped a GoPro to a fish," in which Chris dressed in a way that prompted comments such as, "Chris has been adopting more and more traits that remind me of my grandmother." Okay, so some people just gonna ignore Chris's nails. Chris had to have lost a bet. The
Who was gonna ignore Chris's nails? He was making social media posts about it.
look is getting wild. The response to the video
Lost the bet. That's a reasonable assumption, actually. Yo, imagine if he's like caught up in gambling and he just keeps on losing bets.
video then prompted countless viral TikToks, such as this one with 700,000 likes, stating, "How did Chris go from this to this?" While others even made the claim that Karl had turned him gay.
Now, one thing that's interesting is this all happened during the pandemic, right? Where a lot of people that kind of forced people to be chronically online. Now, the way that certain algorithms are pushing, they're pushing certain narratives. It's possible that it's more the internet influencing Chris here than it is Karl. I think that's actually a lot more likely, because Karl is one kid who was like a youngling to the Mr. Beast channel. I don't know how much leverage or power he would have over Chris to convince him to do something so drastic as like transition and do HRT.
Yeah. Now, this was pretty ridiculous, as Karl isn't even that feminine, and Chris had come out as bisexual years before he and Karl had even met. The true catalyst for Chris Tyson's feminization instead seemed to have come from his marriage. In January 2022, Chris would post a photo with his wife to his Instagram, yet after this, the family photo stopped altogether. Fans also noticed that he'd removed his wedding ring, with the ring's absence correlating perfectly with the very first post in which he'd painted his nails. Chris confirmed the split in a post from March 2023 reading, "For a little over a year now, me and Katie have been separated," with this also confirming that Chris's transformation began as soon as his marriage came to an end.
Is that though? Did the timelines match that well? March 28th, 2023. What's the nail one? Dude didn't even show the time.
Facial appearance
March 28th, 2023. March 20th. Okay. I mean, I can see that then. The times are actually pretty similar.
Information began as soon as his marriage came to an end. Chris went from lighting campfires and raising a family with his beautiful wife to now trying to be a wife with his man buns and long nails. As the criticism continued to pile, Chris announced that he'd be taking a break from social media. And while there was a possibility that Chris would make efforts to return to his former self, he'd rather do the opposite and double down on his feminine image, showing up to the Kids' Choice Awards looking like this, before making the announcement that he'd been doing HRT for approximately 2 months, which according to a quick Google search is the medical process for changing genders. Chris would expand on this by stating, "Informed consent HRT saved my and many others' lives. The hurdles GNC people have to jump through to get life-saving gender-affirming healthcare in a first world country is wild to me. Just let people make informed decisions about their own bodies, which receive."
Okay, now one thing I do want to point out too, in their studies for this, I should probably dig through them and find them and post them in the Discord, but it is not conclusive at all that gender affirming care will save lives in the majority of cases. I mean, there's some cases where it certainly has, but doesn't always shake out that way. There's only one long-term study that's been done on this, and that happened over the course of 40 years. Now, granted, the sample size is small, so I don't think this is conclusive, but it did say people had a higher chance of IRL rage quitting if they went through gender transitions versus if they didn't. So I think that's like one thing to consider too. Another thing to consider is that the vast majority of children who wait until puberty is completed to transition, there's just decide not to transition at all. A whole part of it is, everyone knows that part of being a teenager, you're not, your body's changing. You're not entirely used to it. You're not comfortable with your body. And, a lot of mainstream media, influencer narratives are saying that if you're uncomfortable with your body, it means you got to transition. And they want to rush people into that industry. So the industry is extremely lucrative.
From both Karl and Mr. Beast, who wrote, "Got you, I did one more heart than Karl because I'm a better friend." While his co-workers expressed positivity, others weren't so welcoming. There goes a father figure the kid won't ever be able to look up to. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Weak man time.
This is very true. This is very true. The first part, absolutely. It's very sad that the kid's not going to be able to grow up with like a legit father. He's going to be out of the picture, at least in some respect, because they're getting separated. So the dad who's been there for years is just going to disappear and then show up as a woman or at least not a man at some points. That's kind of unfortunate and pretty sad. And the whole thing about hard times and strong men, the whole thing is legit. Especially because our current society, we kind of focus a lot on comfort. We kind of focus a lot on, coddling people, protecting people's feelings. Because, honestly, we're so privileged as a society that our greatest threats, the biggest things we have to deal with are people hurting our feelings. And so that's kind of treated as like a war zone now. Protecting our feelings is a civil rights issue. It's so cringe, but that's kind of where we're at as a society. Like this dude says, weak times, man.
Chris responded to this comment by stating, "This is just more dog whistling that somehow trans and GNC folks aren't safe around kids. Tucker begs for me to come back when I leave for like 2 days to film. He is so loved and happy. Kids aren't born with hate, it's taught by people like you, and my child will only know love."
That's such weird, it's such a weird cultish response. That's so weird. But I mean, maybe the internet got to him. I feel like a response like this kind of definitely shows that, like, the internet, the whole narrative is kind of getting to him. Like, he said nothing about, parents. He's saying nothing about trans people not being safe around kids. He's just pointing out probably that Chris is getting separated from his family. This does mean that he's not going to have a stable father figure in the picture. How are you going to be separated and then see your kid every day? Like, how does that work, right? And then even then, he's not really going to be like a real father because he's like trying to be more feminine. What Evan's saying is not entirely unbased in reality. Now, I think he is maybe assuming that Chris is not going to be able to be a part of his son's life, or that like his son's going to be repelled by Chris in some way, which according to Chris, the son's completely fine and happy with it. So it might be a little bit uncharitable to say that Chris, will not be in his child's life at all. But I mean, whether or not he's in his life or not, it's certainly not ideal to kind of like take away the experience that like the child would have if he did have like a legit like father who was a masculine figure kind of in his life, and in the family.
I know I'm going to be a great parent, and so is every other person who puts the love of their child before everything. I made this decision because I wanted to show up as my best and happiest self for him. In a way, this was for Tucker.
Okay, one thing I would point out about this, this doesn't really make it seem like he did this for Chris, or that Chris did this for Tucker, because, he's saying that like, I made this. I put the love of my love for my child before everything. I made this decision because I wanted to show up. Like, it's one thing, to make the calculated decision and be like, yeah, this is the best thing to do. But the way that he's phrasing it makes it seem like I want to be my best and happiest when I'm around Tucker. Not like, how would Tucker feel about this? Would he benefit from having a masculine figure in the home? It doesn't really seem like that's a part of his calculus. A lot of it was, how will I feel when I'm around him? Now, granted, that can easily be a very rational, consideration when trying to make a decision about anything. Because, like, let's say that, you have, like, anger issues or something, and you're tempted to drink. And then you're like, well, how will I feel, if I'm if I come home drunk and angry, how would that make my kid feel? I want to show up as my happiest and best self for him. So, I mean, that does make sense. And I'm not completely invalidating everything that Chris is saying. I'm just saying that he's wording it in a way that makes it seem like what he's trying to say isn't actually the case.
Chris's response received some positivity such as, "I'm convinced you're an amazing father. Tucker is lucky to have you and also lucky to have all of those who surround and support you in his life, as well as I adore that, I'm glad you made that decision. It's so much easier to be a parental figure when you're not struggling with dysphoria, yet he'd also receive an equal amount of backlash."
The weird thing about this so far is that, SunnyV2's been like painted as like transphobic, which is a little bit odd because if we're using the term colloquially, like there hasn't really been anything transphobic that SunnyV2 said, right? So far, it's pretty much just been reading messages mentioning there seems to be some sort of correlation between a couple of events, but he hasn't even said his own opinion yet. I find that rather interesting.
You ripped apart your family and took a father figure away from your son just so you could paint your nails and act zesty. Pathetic. He will get torn apart at school, won't want to have friends around his house, a life full of difference and being alone.
I mean, it's a good point, but I think to a certain extent that's the kid's fault, right? Like, you could say that it's reasonable to expect that Tucker would experience this if he goes through transition, so that had to be a part of the calculus. But at the same time, it is the parents' fault, like the parents of the other kids, for not teaching their kids any better if they're going to be bullying Tucker for something that's not even Tucker's fault. It's not Tucker's fault that Chris is doing this. It's Chris's fault. So you shouldn't bully Tucker for this. But, kids are dumb and emotional and some of them like being bullies. But, I think, the parents have to step up. If the parents are going to be bullying Tucker, you have to put an end to it and be like, stop, no, this is unacceptable. We will not take this. Because bullying is not good. Now, knowing how to stand up to bullies is good and an important lesson everyone should learn, but that doesn't mean that you should be the bully. No one should be the bully.
Must have missed the point in that tweet. How's this for him when you're depriving him of a father figure? Although Chris wasn't altered by these comments, as he'd once again reiterate his certainty in a new post reading, "It's never too late to start being yourself," which received praise from Mr. Beast as well as Nolan and Karl.
Interesting.
However,
this is interesting because, people... I saw Ruslan, I think, put out a video saying that Mr. Beast is promoting transgenderism or something like that. And, this leans into, supporting Chris and what he's saying. But, hey, supporting transgenderism or promoting transgenderism would be pushing it out. Saying, hey, if you're experiencing gender dysphoria, you should go transition. Or just, telling people in general, hey, if you're, unsure of how you feel about yourself, yeah, go transition. Throw on some HRT and see how that goes. But we're not seeing such messaging from Mr. Beast, at least not yet, as far as this video is concerned.
These comments also added extra fuel to the fire. In a few years, look back at this thread and remember they were never your friends. Only yes men cowards.
Bro.
Hope you come out of this safe.
Bro, this thing is kind of cringe. Unless he's maliciously trying to trans kids, which doesn't seem to be the case here. Looks like he's literally just doing something for himself and then saying how nice it is. He's more or less just saying this worked for me. That seems to be pretty much what he's saying. I don't understand this tweet at all. Right? I mean, it's true. None of us internet creators are your friends, but to say that this makes him a yes man and a coward? I don't understand.
Mr. Beast responded to this with a simple opinion irrelevant ratio, to which the original commenter would state, "I have 30 followers, so go ahead and ratio me. I'll still rest easy knowing that I'm not a coward who idly sits by watching my friend ruin his own life."
Oh, I see. So is he arguing that Mr. Beast should have intervened and told him, you shouldn't do this? Which, honestly is fair. I'm not going to insert myself into such decisions by other people if they don't necessarily ask me, most likely. I've never really been in this situation exactly, so I can't really say how I would respond. Now if someone asked me my opinion, I would probably say, yeah, no, you probably shouldn't, give yourself scoliosis for, thousands of dollars a month. But, if the person doesn't ask you, You have no obligation, I don't think, to necessarily to tell them to stop, although it probably would be a good thing to tell them to stop. But on the other hand, Mr. Beast clearly agrees. So I think to call him a yes man, I think he's probably being genuine too and supporting him through the transition.
Life. In some ways, it was nice to see the boys standing up for Chris on Twitter. However, the situation has already begun to change the dynamic within the videos. For example, in a recent live stream titled Opening 1,000 Mystery Art Boxes, Chris would once again dress in quite a feminine way, and while everybody participated as usual, the energy and vibe didn't feel nearly as smooth as it normally does. It felt as though there was an unaddressed elephant in the room, and therefore everybody was in their head, as opposed to being in the present moment enjoying each other's company.
That's weird because there's nothing unaddressed or there's nothing there's no elephant. Everything's public on Twitter. Dude said he's on HRT. What more do you want? I mean, he even talked about his preferred pronouns. I don't understand what more you would want from Chris. He's given you guys everything. He told you guys that he's separating from his family. If there's anything, what would be unresolved? I'm at a loss here.
Yeah, maybe everybody was simply too busy opening packages, but Chris did make these bizarre jokes about Jimmy being female, making him incredibly uncomfortable.
Oh my God, Jimmy, look, they drew you. Jimmy, they drew you so well. It looks just like you.
Oh, yes.
Oh my God, it's Jimmy.
How did fan art? This is what we were looking for. Be brave, be honest, be kind, Mr. Beast. That is.
Yo, there's nothing wrong with that type of humor, but the tough thing is, at least from these clips, and now granted, this is highly edited, right? So I could be completely wrong, but it looks like these jokes are making Mr. Beast uncomfortable. I understand. People have different brands of humor, right? The streamer Myth, he didn't get my jokes that I sent him in the chat. It's completely different than a joke that, is visibly making someone uncomfortable, which it seems like is the case here, because we've got Mr. Beast over here sitting on the couch heh, let's open that next box. Versus being I just don't get that joke, man. I'm sorry. This just seems to make him uncomfortable. Let's watch this again. Maybe I'm reading into this too much.
Incredibly uncomfortable.
Oh my God, Jimmy, look, they drew you. Jimmy, they drew you so well.
Yeah,
it looks just like
he doesn't look like that made him he was smiling at first and then his complexion just changed, his countenance just changed to be oh, and then went back to kind of what looks like a fake laugh face to me.
Oh, yes.
Oh my God, it's Jimmy.
How did fan art? This is what we were looking for. Be brave.
Yeah, he's trying to divert attention. So I don't know. If Mr. Beast is uncomfortable by these, by these jokes, I mean, I would say that he probably needs to speak with Chris, behind the scenes, not in front of the cameras, and say, "Hey, those jokes made me uncomfortable. Please don't do that again." Right, and then Chris should listen. I don't think this is as big of a deal, as people would assume that it is, unless there's a pattern of Chris just disregarding Mr. Beast's feelings, which I would frankly presume that there isn't. But yeah, this is a bit odd, but it's not a huge deal. So I think a lot of viewers are probably going to blow this out of proportion. It's not a huge deal.
Be honest, be kind, Mr. Beast. That is my tagline.
Becoming even weirder when each member started to pay each other compliments.
Hey, nice shirt. Thanks, dude. Nice shirt.
Hey, nice shirt.
Thanks, dude. Nice shirt.
Thanks. Nice shirt.
Nice shoes.
For the most part, the live stream was devoid.
Wait, what? Okay, that's weird. Because it makes it seem like Mr. Beast was refusing to compliment Chris's shirt. But he was supporting his transition, on Twitter. I don't know why. Now, maybe it's to get back at him for saying that he looked like a woman or something, as a joke, clearly. But that's kind of weird. Now, is he being fake on Twitter and not actually supporting the transition? Mr. Beast did, at least used to, publicly identify as a Christian. But, I mean, based on an interview with, Logan Paul on Impulsive, he kind of has cast that all to the side. But this is a bit of a strange interaction that shows, it looks like it shows some tension between Chris and Mr. Beast.
Void of awkward moments. However, it would act as fodder for another 100 million views worth of drama and criticism. Chris likely...
Yo, sometimes people fall out temporarily too. Like sometimes people are just grumpy and grouchy. Like this doesn't mean that this is a whole big thing. This is literally one stream. I don't know why people are like taking this to mean so much.
Believes that people will slowly adapt to his new appearance over time, but is this really going to happen? Well, maybe. It's difficult to say as the situation is fairly unique, especially when considering Chris's reputation and influence. However, if Chris continues to transition, would it be unreasonable to say that he could jeopardize some of the personality traits which made him a successful member in the first place? Perhaps the opposite.
This is a good point because a lot of people who transition kind of making a lot of people transition make that transition process their entire like personality to the point where they kind of like cast aside a lot of the aspects of the personality that they had before. So he kind of makes a good point there, but frankly, I'm not quite sure that this would, completely neuter his personality. I mean, we'll see, but I mean, actually I won't see because I have never really watched Mr. Beast. I probably won't watch Mr. Beast unless there's a video that they put out that seems particularly interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. Makes sense.
Opposite will happen, and he'll instead pick up new personality traits that better resonate with the current Mr. Beast audience. This was put forward in many comments supportive of Chris, who implied that there'll be millions of queer kids who look up to him, although this doesn't necessarily mean that it'll add any value to the videos. Mr. Beast has that's an interesting point. It's more about the community, though. He didn't say anything about the quality of the videos. So that's a little bit of a red herring there. The tweet didn't say anything about the quality of the videos. Likely cultivated a massive LGBT audience, all of whom are already watching anyway, and if we've learned anything from Hollywood in recent years, it's that adding over-the-top LGBT characters for the sake of relatability rarely works as intended, and is often nothing more than a distraction from the premise of the movie or video. On top of this, it can be...
But this is not the same as that, because this is real life, pretty much. It's not a cosplay thing, it's not something just for the YouTube channel. It's a legit transition. It's a big deal. A very off-screen big deal.
Be uncomfortable and unrelatable for the silent majority, although as we have seen, a situation like Chris's does have the potential to create an otherworldly amount of discussion, which could be seen as a benefit for the Mr. Beast brand.
Drama is good for growth, 100%. That would be an easy way to up my
So you're a Keemstar?
The problem is this type of situation...
I don't think he's doing this though. I don't think that's what this is, bro. No, he's not gonna separate Chris from his wife and child to get more views on YouTube.
It's probably the last thing that Mr. Beast wants to attract, as he's forced to agree with Chris's position, as he has no way of manipulating the situation without being painted as the bad guy. It's a lose-lose situation for Mr. Beast. I think Jimmy is
I don't think it's a lose-lose situation for Mr. Beast. Look, at the end of the day, it's all about the fan base, right? Because look, if the fan base coalesces around Chris, the fan base coalesces around Mr. Beast, then the Mr. Beast YouTube channel will be fine. Doesn't matter, whether or not he has haters, because the haters are going to be dwarfed by the fans. We actually see those people who are wildly popular. I think Hassan Piker would be a good example of this. Hassan Piker has haters, but I think they're not as numerous as his fans, right? And also on top of that, being trans and LGBT and being a fan of the current thing is very ESG friendly. So it would likely be easier for him to do things like, get placements of, the various products that they've released into stores, or launching things like Beast Burger joints, out in the wild. I think it would be foolhardy to say that this is a lose-lose scenario for Mr. Beast. I can't see how that would be the case.
Inescapable situation. If he kicks out Chris, cancelled. If he don't, his channel will die for real. An inescapable situation.
See, this is presumptuous, right? I don't think his channel will die, because especially since his videos are more about the concepts, right, than the personalities, right? I mean, the personality that matters most is Jimmy's, as I understand it. But again, I'm naive. I don't watch his videos, so I could be wrong.
transition is a pretty good way of describing the drama, which is also why it deserves the harsh label of being a nightmare. Jimmy has no option but to publicly express acceptance of Chris's transition, as silence or even worse, disapproval would come with obvious severe repercussions. However, in accepting...
I don't know. I mean, we're seeing celebrities now kind of push back against current thing about the trans ideology. So, look at the Bud Light thing, right? So I think it's a bit silly to say that he had to do this. He didn't have to do this. He could do what he wants. And I think it's a 50-50 shot either way is whether or not it hurts or helps his brand. Because I think, if Mr. Beast says, you know what, this isn't great what Chris is doing, I feel like he would still have a lot of viewers. I don't think it's enough to tank his videos so long as his videos are still good.
Chris's transition, Jimmy implies that this will be the new normal within the content, thus annoying a different group of people, many of whom will never express their true feelings and may rather simply click on fewer Mr. Beast videos. If this is the case, Jimmy has no option but to accept this fate, as removing Chris from the videos in any kind of way could create an even more severe media firestorm. The only clean solution, should things go south, might be for Chris to resign himself, and even then rumors and bad press will be unavoidable.
Yeah, because you could also argue that Mr. Beast forced him out, right? But I guess this does, beg the question, what's the best way forward? Right? Especially if Chris is going to persist. Because if he, decides to detransition, then everything's probably Gucci, right? He can get back with his family, I would hope. Hopefully his wife would take him back, at least for the sake of the kid. And then everything on the channel would be back to normal. But, I mean, of course it doesn't help that there's apparent on-screen tension between Chris and Mr. Beast. That's not good. I would say, frankly, just don't talk about it, right? He was already becoming more and more feminine, right? He said that he was on HRT for 2 months and people didn't even know necessarily that HRT was what he was on. So I would say just be quiet about it. Don't address it and keep it pushing. Because at the end of the day, it is about the content. This whole thing about him being trans, I think, is a little bit of a sideshow, especially since he's not talking about it on screen, right? He's not going on, the videos saying, hey, look at me, I'm on HRT, and isn't it so cool that I'm not a guy anymore or whatever. He's not doing that. He's not being like, hey, kids, you should transition too. He's not doing that either, which is the extreme right is kind of misconstruing things to make it seem like it's what he's saying. So it's just weird. Kind of a weird situation to be in, and some people are having weird takeaways. But SunnyV2 video is not particularly bad, so I don't know why people are complaining about it, except for, of course, the assumption that the only thing that could possibly happen is the channel going down. Assuming that people aren't going to support the channel if he's trans. I don't think that's accurate.
Whether it be arrogance or ignorance, Chris seems oblivious to how this whole thing might impact Jimmy, forgetting that he achieved his current level of success by avoiding this exact type of drama.
An abrupt ending there. But anyways, that was interesting. That was kind of interesting. Not as dramatic or opinionated as I was expecting. But I'm a bit confused by people were saying that video was transphobic. So if you guys have any idea of what is wrong with the video, leave a comment down below, and I'd be interested to hear your opinions on this. Certainly a sad case, but we'll have to see. But also at the end of the day, I don't particularly care because I don't watch Mr. Beast. I just wanted to cover it to see if the video is as bad as people say, because I watched a lot of SunnyV2. Some of his videos I don't particularly like the most, but I at least love his editing skills and his voice is fire, so